So these are all the VHS tapes, or most of them, in the house. And these in the TV room are from they only belong to Dad and Sam, because Mom has some VHS tapes, but they're up in the bedroom. And you can tell Dad's because he writes in a big, heavy, all caps style handwriting, and Sam does not. So, contrary to popular opinion, the X-Files tapes are not Dad's, they're in fact Sam's.
With stuff like JFK
yes.
has an obvious dad interest, and some of the other stuff that we put in there was very much like, what is a dad movie?
Yeah.
You know, what is when we were growing up, for instance, like, what is a movie that our dad or a neighbor's dad would have? So stuff like The Andromeda Strain or Moonraker, it's just sort of like, yeah, dads
love that shit.
Yeah, dads that were born in the 50s, were super into that kind of stuff. And then some of it was, you know, stuff that we liked or remembered from when we were growing up. Like, you will know that Carla was involved in making this game because Beetlejuice and RoboCop are on a VHS tape. That's most of what you need to know about Carla.
That's true.
Right there.
My name is Sarah Grayson, and I do the voice of Sam Greenbrier in Gone Home. Currently based out of Portland, Oregon, so right around where the Fulbright Company is from, which is part of, I guess, how this all came to be. I started doing voiceover work probably about 4 or 5 years ago. It's been a bit of an on and off journey because I also have had regular 9-to-5 jobs that whole time. So I always get excited when I see video game auditions come across because it's always been something that I wanted to do, and really excites me because I'm a video game fan myself. So there was an audition that came across that at the time was entitled Dear Diary, and it had this wonderful description about being this sort of 16, 17-year-old girl. Not too much detail about her, just that she was new to her school, new to this place she was living, and her sister had moved away. So she was sort of writing out her thoughts as if she was talking to her sister. So most of the time, I'll stand up at the mic when doing auditions. But for this one, I thought, well, no one's actually going to read their diary standing up. Like, this is kind of you write your diary while lying down in your bed, or like sitting cross-legged on the floor, or whatever. So I ended up having to pull the mic down, sat on my couch, legs crossed, got nice and cozied up in like my pajamas, and started reading it.
This is our old-timey record that we got from archive.org, source of all good things. It's by Adrian Rollini when he was with, apparently, the Taproom Gang. The song is entitled Got a Need for You, in case you can't read it, but you should be able to read it. And the duck I found on the internet. Adrian Rollini I got into him when I was on Bioshock 2 and helping source the soundtrack for that. And I did a lot of listening to 40s big band stuff, and Adrian Rollini was one of the ones that I really liked, and so it was cool to be able to revisit that.
I can confirm that is a real song, and I can confirm that some company out there still cares about it, even though I'm pretty sure the copyright should expire pretty soon, because I got a copyright claim on my video. Not to the point where it impacted it. It was just like, hey, if you monetize this video, we're going to take your money. And I was just like, I don't monetize my videos anyway, so I don't care. But I was definitely expecting the Riot Girl stuff to get copyright claimed, and most of it did. But this? That threw me for a loop. But honestly, at the end of the game, it was just weird to see. But I'm just glad it wasn't like, hey, you can't have that music at all. We're going to mute your video. And if that does happen in the future, because I know they can retroactively change that, if at any part in this series, they just like, the audio just cuts out completely, because they don't notify you either, I don't think. If the audio just like cuts out completely, like, let me know. Like, message me, post a comment on this video, because I get notifications for all the comments. Like, do that, and I'll figure out what I can do about it. But, like, yeah. So long as it doesn't affect the video itself, I'm fine. If it does affect the video, let me know.
Sam's story slash school assignment called The Menstrual Cycle, a novella, is kind of a fan favorite we've found. Like, a lot of people have enjoyed it a lot. And it's one of those weird things where it wasn't planned. Like, it was... Let's see. I had decided that I wanted Sam to have done, like, some homework, and I thought sex ed homework would be interesting, because sex ed is a weird class in high school to be in, and so I Google searched for an actual sex ed assignment, and the assignment is a real sex ed assignment that is given out in, like, the Pacific Northwest, like Seattle. I think this is technically from the Seattle School District website that I got this from. So I found this thing which I didn't come up with, that I was kind of presented with, and I think I had been reading some stuff about, like, cool female spies in World War II, or, like, saboteurs, that had been part of, like, the French Resistance and stuff like that, and so that's why the history book is next to the sex ed assignment. The intended implication being Sam was doing history homework and sex ed homework, and the history unit was on World War II, and so kind of as a fuck you to all of the annoying assumptions implied by the sex ed assignment, she wrote this story about a woman in the war who was more interesting than her menstrual cycle, like, that is a person, but while fulfilling the requirements of the thing. And yeah, it ended up being this really kind of strange juxtaposition of concepts that ended up saying a lot about Sam, I think.
Okay. The only problem with that, though, is that this assignment was from September, like a month into the school year. What world history class would be talking about World War II at the beginning of the year? None of them. Because, basically, almost all classes do this, and it's basically the only way you can, because history builds upon itself. But to study history, you generally have to go sequentially. Towards the beginning, you can sort of, like, section it off and be like, we're talking about Egypt today. Now the Mesopotamians. Because it's sort of segmented, they have much less interaction. But once you start getting past the age of Columbus, you definitely have to go sequentially, because developments in one nation will affect nations in all the others. So you can't just jump to Africa in the 1800s without understanding North America in the 1700s first. Or the French Revolution, for that matter. Well, in terms of Africa, maybe. You can do without the French Revolution. Europe in the 1800s, you do have to understand the French Revolution. But, again, just a small little gripe about that.
Most of the bookshelves in the house are filled with undifferentiated books. I mean, they're not undifferentiated, but they're low detail, because, God, it would be an entire dev cycle's worth of work to actually do plausible spines on every single book. That would kill us. And then to repeat a whole bunch of books would also be sort of terrible, and not be very plausible. So we had chiefly unlabeled books, or books in which the labels have been rubbed off due to age, etc. And we had a few individual books that were more precisely and specifically named.
The way that we did the books in the game is we made, like, 3 or 4 of these clumps of books that have, the generic spines on them. They're just sort of filler books. They're kind of like what would be in the bookshelves of, like, a lawyer's office in a cheap lawyer's TV commercial or
right,
something.
Where they buy them by the foot and whatever.
Yeah, and then we took 1 or 2 clumps and retextured them to all have specific readable spines on them, and then I just took those clumps and broke them up and scattered the individual books around in different bookshelves in the house, so that hopefully, I think every bookshelf has at least one unique book in it. That might not be true of everything in the library, since there's so many bookshelves there, but I guess I should say every or almost every bookcase had at least one unique book in it that never repeated, to kind of split the difference of, okay, they're not all generic, but also we can't afford to make them all unique, and we didn't want to have any repeat in an obvious way. So that was our strategy for trying to not do any of the things that we wanted to not do.
Looking at him, I can see what he means about the generic books repeating. Like, for example, this one with, I think that's like a medical symbol on it. It has the title of like the daughter of an empire. Oh, that's probably like either a Russian or Eagle. Then yeah, that's the same book there, and also there. So yeah, they just sort of like resize it and recolor it. I mean, resize and recolor it. You can see that a bunch of times. It's probably wasn't a good idea to have a specific logo on it in that case, but yeah, like you can see too right there. But generally, I was wondering earlier, like, why did I think this was the one. Oh, Bishop Gray. One of these was odd. Oh yeah, I think it was this one. Platonic Solids. Yeah, why they chose that one, I have no idea. But anyway, that might be all for this hallway, I'm not quite sure. Oh, nope.
I feel like one of the best bits of advice was actually from the Fulbright team before going in to do the first recording. And it was a suggestion that I should watch some episodes of My So-Called Life, which was great because I'd watched them all when they were actually on. It was one of those favorite shows my sister and I would sit down and watch every week. And so going back and watching them was definitely not a hard chore to have to do. So I basically went through all of the episodes I could find online in a couple of days. So it was a bit of a sudden binge watch of My So-Called Life, but it was great because I think watching My So-Called Life was a nice reminder of what a more natural presentation of a teenager is. So it was really, I don't know that it would have gone as well had I not done that.
One thing I'd like to comment on real quick, usually this game, it's pretty narrow in how you can go about it. You're usually set along, you're not set along a set path. It's sort of Super Metroid-esque in that, yes, you can technically go a bunch of different places at once, but the game sort of gently and unnoticeably guides you in a certain direction, just through the environment itself. Of course, it's not as complex as Super Metroid. I would be freaked out if a 3D house like this was as complex as Super Metroid. But, I want to touch upon that because at the start of this game, just about every player I know walks through the front door, they see that light up at the top, they see it flickering, but they eventually get drawn over here to the phone, to the answering machine, and then go through the door here, and then obviously you start here, and then read that note, and that touches off the game, because that's the first note. However, you obviously can't go to the right because the door is locked. Because the door is locked. Sorry, that was a very narrow reference. But, the weird thing is, up here is open from the start. You can go up here. The game more or less expects you to go left, and that is what most players do, but somehow it communicates to you that you're supposed to go, sorry for that lag there, somehow it communicates to you that you're supposed to go left. You're not supposed to come up here right away, and I don't even know why that, I don't know how it does that. Maybe it's because it's darkened up here, or you heard the thing on the answering machine, so you're naturally drawn over there, or maybe it's because there's like no lights up here to begin with, you just have the flickering chandelier. Also, it looks scary up here, and you don't want to go to the scary place. But maybe just because that's a unique area, it has the painting and the phone, and you're naturally drawn towards the phone because you heard the messages at the beginning, and then since you're right there, you just go through the door right there. I think that's it. Because you wouldn't really have anything to do when you walk up here. There's nothing necessarily guiding you up here. except for like the flickering light. Well, I mean, except for like this being the first thing you see when you walk in.
We never really discussed the idea of individually scoring each audio log ahead of time. I just got an email one day from Steve after they had done the first round of voice recording with Sarah Grayson, who did an amazing job as Sam. And he said he'd been thinking about the idea of giving each log a piece of music to ground it in the proper tone. So I just started doing these short 20 to 60 second pieces, and that ended up being the bulk of the work for the game. It was a very iterative process. I did them in the order they were recorded, and I would just keep sending revisions of each log to Steve, taking his feedback, modifying the piece, and sending it back. Especially at the beginning, the feedback was almost always pull it back more. I've never done music this subdued before. Even more so than most game music, it primarily exists to quietly suggest a mood and tone to the player. Sarah's voice is always the main audio content. The game soundtrack I worked on previous to this was Blendo Games' 30 Flights of Loving, which consists of some really huge, bombastic, brassy pieces. So switching gears to Gone Home and constantly hearing pull it back, less melody, was surprisingly challenging at first. But over time, I think Steve and I developed a pretty good rapport. For the most part, the diaries required fewer revisions each time. And it's always a good reminder in a collaborative endeavor that your contribution only exists to make the whole work better, not to be seen or heard unto itself.
I had seen Bikini Kill and Bratmobile play their first show at the North Shore Surf Club in Olympia. That was Valentine's Day, 1991. And I was kind of blown away by the incredible rawness and the honesty that they wrote with, and the kind of flippancy that they had. I thought was really interesting. But to have the opportunity to talk about all of these issues that are really important to young women, I thought was really special. And I thought that what they were doing was taking the kind of intense feminist ideas that had become popular in the 70s with, SDSS, and now, those really, incredible ideas and the ideology of feminism, but they were putting it into a language for today, for the 90s, I guess. That was
Right.
20 years ago, but it was for young people, and it was to relate to topics about sexuality, about sex, about sexual abuse, about sexism and harassment, and all these things that are really important for young women coming of age and becoming sexual beings that are really taboo to talk about.
If you'll excuse me for a second. Alright, so just bear with me. If my phone happens to beep or ring, like, I need it to be on right now, and this is sort of the best time I can record for quite a while, so just bear with me. And like I said, this has to be recorded before the previous bonus episodes go up, so...
The life cycle of the condom.
That's not a real thing, Steve.
The life cycle of the condom.
All right.
By Carla Zamanja.
Is as follows. Initially, the condom was a separate plot point. It was an actual plot point. We gave it to Lonnie, and we had Sam find it in Lonnie's purse, and it made Sam worried about what the hell she was doing with it, etc. And that was sort of a wedge to drive them apart when that was the storyline, which it no longer is. And because we decided we hated it. But I had already made the condom asset, which I'm actually really proud of. I really like that condom. It's really good. Also, I think Nero is a really good brand for condoms. Anyway.
Yeah, it's a play on Trojan and everything, but
yeah,
it works.
But it's, it's the whole, notably decadent,
Right,
it's like,
yeah.
Anyway, I like it. I'm proud of this thing.
And the specular on it looks really nice.
It does look good. I don't know. So we had this, extra asset lying around, and we were like, we were all, oh, it's a shame that it's going to waste, but whatever. Sometimes things don't get used. And then we remembered the horror of digging around in your parents' drawers and finding their condoms and stuff, and being just utterly fucking horrified. And we decided we'd give that to you, the player.
I'll be honest, I just now noticed that there are windows on the roofs. On the roof, I guess. Just the one roof. Though, that said, doesn't that actually, Isn't that almost directly where? No, the basement's farther away. Not the basement, the attic, the opposite. I will admit, I really like the look of these wood-style roofs as an interior. I can't even remember what the ceiling, I should say. That's the better term, because the roof is the whole structure. These wood-looking ceilings, they just, I don't know, they feel very homely to me, and it just appeals to me.
One of my favorite things that came out during development was someone wrote an email mistakenly referring to Mittens, and Steve replied in the voice of Katie, saying, "It's just Mitten. She's only one cat, Mom."
So there's a lot less density in the house than there would be in a real house. Like, if you look around your house, there's just junk piled everywhere, probably.
Maybe
like,
it's just our house.
I think it's most house.
Oh, you're right.
But, so, our strategy was you either fully invest in something and, put, like, a plausible representation of this aspect of a room in, or you just don't put it in at all. And the player will fill in the gaps between, like, oh, these are all the things that represent the kind of room I'm supposed to be in, and it doesn't jump out at me that there's no toilet plungers in the bathroom or whatever. But the biggest instance of this that I think actually totally worked, because no one has ever called it out, is, surprise, think about it, there are no shoes in this house. Ta-da!
Where's your brain now?
and I don't think anybody's noticed it, and I think it's because if we had put one pair of shoes or two pairs of shoes, people would have said, where are all the rest of the shoes?
Right.
But really, to have a plausible house, Mom would have to have 10 pairs of shoes and her work boots, and Dad would need to have some tennis shoes and some work shoes, and so on and so forth. So we just said, there aren't going to be any shoes, and we hope nobody notices.
I'll give them props. Because, now that he mentions it, it's pretty obvious, since they have everything else here, but I don't know. They just disguised it well, I guess. Also, you might have noticed during the main playthrough that I was looking on shelves for a bunch of stuff. This is what I was looking for. Escape from the Ghost Mansion. Avoid the ghosts of Ghost Mansion to make your escape with your wits intact. 2 or more players, because is there really any board game that you can play with one person? Oh wait, ages 8 and up. Spooky. A few of the shades you may encounter. The widow, the cowboy, and he has a small gun, and the brothers, as you attempt to escape not from the Ghost Mansion, just from Ghost Mansion. Anyway, they have something to say about that. I thought that was interesting because it sort of shows Sam's early interest in ghosts.
Another board game. This one wasn't done by me though. This one was done by Carla, but I really like it because the ghost figures on the back of the game are actually long deceased family members of mine. When I was home at Christmas, I was digging through my family's basement, sort of getting an idea of what a basement has in it, just sort of for set dressing purposes. And while I was down there, I found a big box that my family actually hadn't seen. We got a big box of things from my grandmother after she passed away. And inside this box was all these tin types, love letters and sort of immigration papers and notes from as far back as the 1850s when my family had emigrated from Scotland and Ireland. And I asked my family if it was possible that I include these in some sort of artistic project, and they said sure. They gave me their blessing, and I scanned them. And I didn't know if they were actually going to make it in the game, but then I saw that Carla had made this game, and really liked that they showed up as ghosts on the back of it. And it's sort of, I think, a nod for idle thumbs listeners who really feel quite passionately about ghosts, as it turns out. Surprise!
I sort of wish, I would never have guessed that those were real, actual family members on the back. It's just, they're so different looking. I sort of wish I had that because as far as I know, the only family photos we have are from, the earliest are that my grandmother took of her family, so those would be like from the 60s and 70s, 1960s and 70s. We do have a few photos of earlier of, I think, my dad's paternal parents, and those would be like from the 1920s, but those are few and far between. It's basically just like wedding photos, and I think that's all. But otherwise, most of our stuff is much more recent. Let's go ahead and play this.
Barf Burger is enjoyed by all. So the thing is, I drew the Barf Burger because I drew all of Lonnie's drawings. So I drew the two cats on the motorcycle and the Captain Allegra drawings and stuff like that. And that was really I think that it goes hand in hand with, I did Lonnie's handwriting in the game, and Carla did Sam's handwriting. And that was partly because the two of us were going to be working the most closely on this stuff, and so being able to just quickly like rewrite a note that we wanted to change and scan it and update the game and not have to like email somebody to say, oh, could you write that again or whatever, was really useful. And also we both just happen to have sloppy teenager handwriting that looks believably 17 years old. Also, I have a believably 17-year-old level of drawing skill, so that worked too. But it was fun because basically the notes were created in real life in essentially the same way they were in the fiction, where I would write my part of the note and then hand the piece of paper to Carla, and she would write her part of the note, and we just constructed it that way.
I feel slightly insulted because my handwriting is nowhere near as good as that, or my drawing skills, and like I'm sort of offended because like he said those were believably 17, and I'm just like, what am I then, 4?
A lot of Gone Home is about pointless interactivity that is sort of things being interactive for the sake of them being interactive, but it really comes from our inspirations of immersive sims like System Shock and Bioshock and Thief, where a big part of the design philosophy behind those games and Gone Home is that the world needs to be really internally consistent, and there's this feeling that if there's something that your character might do, you should be able to do it in the game. So in Bioshock, for instance, you can flush all the toilets and you can turn on all of the faucets, and that's also true in like Deus Ex and Dishonored. Like, and sometimes like the water fountains in Deus Ex give you like 1 health or whatever, but really you can interact with them because there's this expectation of if you could interact with that if you.
Lonnie brought her hair dye over today.
Sorry, I completely
She
forgot
said I
that
need to fix
it
these
cancels
roots.
out if you
Think
do
you
that.
could help?
So skip ahead.
A lot of if you could interact with that, if you encountered it in this world, we should let you do that, right? So, all of the faucets in our game can be turned on, and they can be turned on so that you can turn them on, and you can flush all the toilets, and it extends into our philosophy behind you can pick up every plastic cup and toothbrush and Kleenex box, not because it's going to add a whole lot to your understanding of this world to be able to look at the underside of a cup, but to pay off that expectation and say to the player, yeah, you could pick that up and look at it, so we're going to let you do that, and it's going to be consistent interactively with the stuff that is important, and that makes it your job to look at everything and give it your attention, and for you to decide and understand and figure out what has significance and what doesn't, and not for us to tell that to you.
Sure enough, you can flush the toilets. That's not a detail I cared to figure out.
The boxes of tampons that you can find in the washrooms around the house, they weren't originally on the list of items that needed to be modeled, but when you're creating a bathroom at that level of fidelity, and when you're creating a bathroom for a teenage girl, no less, the idea of not having something like that is kind of jarring. It was kind of jarring to me, especially because when you're at that age, your period is something that kind of really defines your mood at any given day, and maybe what you wear and where you go. So, I just thought it was something necessary for visual storytelling, especially of a girl going through what she's going through.
Well, I mean, I've always, one of the most comforting things in the world to me is having somebody, like, brush my hair or stroke my head. Like, my mom, when I wasn't feeling well, I could lie down in her lap and she would just brush my hair. And it would always make me feel better. Like, the weirdest way, I couldn't figure out why, but it just seemed like this friendly connection to somebody that it is, like she says, it is strangely intimate in a way that I'd not really, I guess, put into words until reading that part of the script. Where that's what I was thinking of, was like that connection, that sort of human touch, that it's something so friendly and so loving that you can do. And that whole idea of like touching someone's scalp being so intimate, it just made me think of that. Just those wonderful little moments where just a touch can be so much more.
So these are stereoscopic? Yeah, these are stereograms.
Yeah,
That's the
stereogrammatic.
Yeah, stereograms, popularized by the Magic Eye brand of images from the 80s and 90s. These really work. Like, if you cross your eyes and you can do a Magic Eye image, you can see what's in these. Spoilers, they are.
Well, as I recall, there's a cool shark.
And
I don't remember what the other one was.
Carla,
What?
it's a big heart.
Okay, it's hard for me to do those things.
And that's true for a lot of people. So the two instances of people not being able to see those images are they just can't do them, which a lot of people just can't do them, or they were born in the late 90s or after the 90s and played our game and didn't know what the hell these things were.
Yeah, they're like, what is this weird static shit? Yeah.
Well, I thought it was like, we got some messages that were like, I thought it was just a weird drawing.
So good.
So, yes, as you get older, you can't hear really high-pitched sounds anymore, and you know what Magic Eyes are still.
It's the circle of life. Yeah, I ended up being pretty happy with this. This is the only picture of Lonnie that we had for a really long time, and I was really glad to actually come up with something that we liked, since this kind of thing is really hard, especially when it is such a major character. The other thing is, Lonnie has a cross necklace. She also has some Catholicism in her family.
Yeah, and I think that's something that I don't think that particular detail has been called out by anybody. People notice like the Bibles and whatnot, but yeah, I intended for Lonnie, like, I thought it would be interesting if she came from a more conservative family than Sam's, in that she actually wears a cross necklace and carries some Catholicism with her, and her dad was an army guy, and her background is even in some ways maybe kind of more stifling than Sam's, and that's probably why she's a more like openly rebellious person on the outside.